The year is 1998, and I am lying on a massage table, clothed with a blanket over me, and I am working with a shamanic practitioner, and I'm feeling kind of desperate. I had left my job about 18 months before. I had been the director of undergraduate women's and gender studies at Columbia University. And I had left that job because I was really burning out. And I have language for this now, but at the time, I just knew I needed to get out. I kind of felt like I was dying. And I realize now the words I would put to it are that my spirit was dying, my soul was dying. And so it kicked me out of the academy, which was challenging because I come from an academic family and it was everything that I had planned on doing. I had, spent 8 years getting a PhD and gotten this great job at Columbia. And then I was really unhappy. And so I had left, and then I started my own business with a network marketing company. And much to my surprise, I did well in that company. But within a pretty short period of time, about a year, I gotten really burnt out again. And I felt like I was hitting a wall. And so that's what led me to being on this massage table with this beautiful woman. And she had really, really helped me a lot. I was very left brain when I was a professor and an academic. And I think one of the things that I really needed when I left was to develop my right brain and my creativity and to open my intuition. And these were actually pretty new intelligences of mine, new faculties that I hadn't well developed while I was an academic. And so she had really helped me with all of that. And I was lying there and I was feeling this kind of sense of desperation, like the ground underneath me was disintegrating, while at the same time I felt like I was kind of in a grindstone, where I was being squished between these two stones. And I felt this incredible pressure. And at the same time, like I was falling. It was very paradoxical and it was scary. And I was like, what is going on? And she brought through my guides. I had just been learning to connect with my guides at that time. And she brought through my guides, and they said, we cannot afford the time. We do not have the time for you to die and be reborn again, to be reincarnated in another body. So you have to die and be reborn in the same body. So take that in for a minute. You have to die and be reborn again in the same body. Now, that is a statement that has stayed with me for a very long time. It was an ego death. I had already been through one phase of that early in life when I was a teenager, and then when I was leaving Columbia and here, and those two were kind of tied together. And it was a very disruptive and challenging time for me. It has happened to me 2 other times since then. And the crazy part of it is that I started to get good at it because I started to be able to track the process of what happens when the world that I knew started to fall apart and drop away. And the me that I knew that was a part of that world didn't fit anymore. And it started to break apart and fall away. Have any of you had an experience like that? You want to just put something in the chat. Yes, like I can relate. I can relate to that. Or yes, I have, if that's something that you felt. Because since then, I have talked to many people, and this has been a lot of the work that I've done with clients, is to help go through that ego death. And when that old part of us dies and the world around us starts to shift and drop away, is when something new can occur. And for me personally, I can say that it was not an easy path. This has not been an easy path, but it's been extraordinarily rich. And it's brought many new things into my life that I would not have been able to, with my mind, to have imagined. Like when I was a professor at Columbia, I would not have imagined that I would join a network marketing company just a couple of years later. That was not something I would have imagined possible, right? And there have been a number of things that if I had, looked out into my future, I would not have imagined where I went. So if you've had that experience where you realize that your life has taken you on paths that were not predictable and not something that you even envisioned, and yet led you to experiencing your life in new ways that were really rich and exciting, even maybe once you got past the feeling of disruption and of things falling apart for you. I'm just going to take a look here at the chat. Yes, Annette says yes. And Carol says yes. Yes, I can relate. It's happened to me as well. Leaving a career, yes, that you felt like was taking your soul. Yes, absolutely, multiple times. Yeah, left what I thought was a perfect marriage because I felt this. Yes, absolutely. This brings tears hearing you say this. Yes, I'm in this process now. I hear you. Yeah, I think that this is, it's more common than maybe many of us know. And it's one of the reasons I want to bring it up here, because I want you to know that if you're experiencing this, or if you have, you're definitely not alone. My work with the 8 pillars of feminine sovereignty, which is kind of the structure for this conference, grew out of more than 20 years of my own personal development, but then also my work with clients in terms of moving through this kind of an ego death, this kind of breakdown of what was normal and what was our stability and how we thought our lives were going to go as something new emerges. And so the pillars, initially, the first 4 pillars, it's kind of a spiraling journey. The first 4 pillars are all about the inner landscape. It has to do with our connection with source, our emotional wisdom, our emotional intelligence, our physical vitality and embodiment, and our radiance and energetic mastery. These first 4 pillars are all about how we are developing ourselves on the inner landscape. Pillar number 5, we're still inside, but we start to turn outward, where we're diving into our purpose and also to our contribution in the world. And I know I'm a human design specialist and quantum human design specialist, and many people come to me wanting to know more about their life purpose and their contribution. And human design is actually really great for helping people to get in touch with possibilities of that. And it's often different than what you think. It's not necessarily what you do for a living. Sometimes it's more of a calling, and sometimes it's more just of the way that you show up in your life. So this is also where we just start to look outward and to understand that we just need to do our own part. Overwhelm can come when we start feeling like we couldn't possibly make an impact on what's going on in the world. And that's a very disempowering thought. And so part of pillar number 5 is just really being able to grab onto what is your piece and to do your piece while you can still have a somewhat of a bigger picture of what's happening in the world. So we're not living with our head in the sand either. Then the last 3 pillars, which are excellent communication, mutually beneficial collaboration, and a benevolent attitude and approach to all of life, have to do with how we're engaging with other people, with things that are going on in the world, with our work in the world, with the organizations we're a part of, with our community members, with our families, and with how we are relating to the natural world and to our role as we're the dominant species on the planet, right? What is our role as the stewards of this planet? And I think that we are evolving into that place where we realize that that's something that we need to develop in ourselves, that we can't go on acting like the earth has an infinite amount of resources to provide to us. It is true in the cosmic field, there's an infinite amount of energy. But on our beautiful planet, we're seeing that we've actually used a lot of these resources, and we need to shift the way that we're thinking about the planet, the way we're thinking about each other, and also about our trees and the other animals, the birds, the oceans, and so on. So we're in a shift and moving out of a kind of adolescent attitude that we've had about kind of taking, and being just self-determining or being just autonomous, which is kind of an old, more masculine version of sovereignty, into a feminine sovereign approach, which understands that we are related to each other and we're related to all of life, and that we have the responsibility as well as the opportunity to really be stewards of that. So the 8 pillars of feminine sovereignty grew out of, like I said, my own personal growth journey, and then my time working with clients and tracking this process. And what I've found, and I'm sure you found this too, that as you do a certain amount of healing and growth on the inner landscape, you are turn outward, engage in the outer world. And as you grow and expand and become bigger in the outer world, sometimes there's a part of you that calls you back, that needs your attention, that hasn't, maybe a trauma that hasn't fully healed yet, or a limiting belief that's putting up a wall in front of you and getting in the way of you being able to move forward the way that you want to. Or sometimes it's just that we need to grow a new capacity, like we need to learn how to listen better, which is a part of excellent communication. Or we need to know how to work with our energy bodies so that we can actually have more energy and be more sustainable. Or maybe we need to learn how to collaborate with people that we don't get along with, or maybe that we just don't agree with, right? And we have to build these capacities. So we spiral back inward to build more inner capacity, and then we spiral back outward and we engage in life and we grow and expand more. And so it's this spiraling process of being on the inside, spiraling outward, spiraling back inward. And I always want to remind you that when something that you've touched into before and done some healing around, and it feels like, and it's arising again, and you might feel like, oh no, I've gone backward. You haven't gone backward, because you're in a different place. You're just somewhere else on your spiral. And so you're spiraling back inward, and in all likelihood, you're able to actually meet your own self and what's going on inside at a very different level, and maybe in a new place. You can handle something that in the past, wasn't available to you because you weren't ready for it. And this is what the spiraling journal of evolution is all about. And that's what the 8 pillars help us to be able to work with. So even though it seems to be presented as a linear kind of hero's journey type of form, it's actually a spiraling form. And where we will always be going back inside as we're building ourselves, and as we go outside and we come back inside. Okay, so let's all take a big breath. Rub your hands together. Go ahead and put them anywhere on your body that would feel good to you. I'm just going to put them on my belly. I'm going to breathe into my belly. I mentioned to you that I am a human design and quantum human design specialist, and that system is really built into the 8 pillars of feminine sovereignty. Now, you don't have to understand human design to really get the essence of the pillars, so don't think that. But if you are a human design person, and I can see some of you are, you might want to take a look at how human design is influencing the pillars. There is a video that I created that's on the 8 pillars. Our fear of the future is something that gets in the way of our ability to actually imagine a future that we want to live inside of, because we're afraid of it. So I want to tell you another little story about that and how this showed up for me. And I want you to think about this. So maybe about 9 years ago or so, I was in another situation. Wasn't exactly an ego death, but it was definitely a disruptive and challenging time for me. And I had this sensation more than I'd ever had at any other time. And you probably have heard this phrase, right? That you get what you focus on, right? That energy will follow your attention, and then that will manifest. So for me, I would wake up in the morning with this deep fear of the future. And I had this whole scenario going on in my mind about how I was going to lose my family, my home, and my business. And it was terrifying. And I would wake up in the morning, and that would be the first thing that I would feel. And then I would start to get more command over my consciousness. And it was like flipping a switch on a television. And I could start to get myself through my own personal work. Again, this is what I've learned through, these ego deaths, is how to do this kind of work, and what the 8 pillars teaches us to do, to get myself to give energy to a story in which everything worked out okay. Now, the thing is that what that meant about how things worked out okay was not super clear to me. Like I was saying before, things open up that you had no idea was going to happen. So for me, it was more of a commitment to a knowing, an inner knowing that things are going to work out okay. And during the course of the day, during that time, I would switch back and forth between this fear of the future and the sense that everything that was okay. It literally was like turning a channel on a television set. And over time, I was able to give enough attention to the one where everything worked out okay, that was the reality that I was living in more and more all the time. And it was based in my intuition because I couldn't see my future. I had to have faith that it was going to work out okay. And I had to tune in to my connection with my guides and with the earth and with the sky to be able to build this faith. And so I'm wondering, for any of you, if you've had that kind of a situation before, where you were really aware that these were these different perceptions that you could be inside of, and that it might feel initially like you didn't have command over which one you were in, but eventually, as you worked with it, that you could. I want to just take you on a little journey for you to feel this sense of the fear in the body, and then to help open up to our intuition more. Okay, so are you with me? Are you ready to go on a little journey with me? Just put yes or I am in the chat. Just want to check in, make sure you're all still there. Yes. This is happening now. Okay, I'm blooming and becoming so in tune. Okay, preset. Okay, yes, definitely. Yes, thank you. Okay, awesome. Just always like to check since I can't see you. All right. So just go ahead, rub your hands together, and just place them on your heart or your belly, and close your eyes for a moment. And bring your awareness inside. Take a couple of deep breaths, allowing your perception to move back inside your head, into the center of your head, and down into your body. And I want you to tune in to any fear of the future that you might have. It's really easy to do when we're facing the big challenges that are present in our world today. So it wouldn't be surprising at all if you had some. And just seeing if you can locate it in your body anywhere, if it's in your belly, if it's in your heart, if it's in your back or your head. And just breathing into that space. And tuning into it, if you can, as energy. And you may have a story that arises, like a scenario, like I said I had before, in that disaster station. And that's okay. And just notice if you start to get caught up in that story. See if you can differentiate between the story, which is probably a looping thought form, and it may have emotional energy attached to it also. Just see if you can differentiate yourself a little bit from that story or the place that you feel it in your body, but observing, being curious with some loving attention. You're not even trying to change it or make it go away. Good. And if you do feel it in your body somewhere, go ahead and just move your hands to wherever you might feel it. So I feel a little bit in my solar plexus, so I'm moving my hands into that place, just right underneath my rib cage. And I want you to just take a couple of deep breaths. For those of you who either are familiar with clarity breathwork or you watched Ashana Solaris's pre-recorded session where we did 7 minutes of clarity breathwork, you could do a little bit of that breathing if you want. And you're just, again, bringing your loving attention here and calling on your own inner soul self, your inner divine mother, your inner wise woman, your inner loving parent, whatever aspect of you or what you can tap into makes sense. And you're just really holding space for this part of you that may be feeling this discomfort or this fear. And I just want you to ask this part to share a little bit about what are you feeling and what do you need? And opening up your inner receptor sites, just think if you can feel something or hear something or see something, just tuning in to this energy, allowing it to show itself. You're just showering loving kindness to this part. And just noticing if it's the same or different. Good. And I want you to imagine a beautiful container, not like a locked box, more like a beautiful chalice. Could be more of a beautiful treasure box, but with the crack open so it's not locked down. Anything that comes to mind for you. Could be more like a cookie jar. I have different things coming to mind. And I want you to imagine taking this fear of the future and dropping it into that container. Just inviting it to be inside of that container and pouring some of your loving kindness, the light from the center of your chest, to live with that fear and to just hold it. And it may start to change. It may have already dissolved, but if it's not, that's okay. We just want to give it a safe space to live and for you to surround it with this loving kindness. And if there is a part that needs your more attention from you, you can let that part know that you're going to make some time later on when you can come back. Beautiful. Okay. And I'm going to invite you to, if you want to, you can take a minute or two to write in your journal. I always suggest that you have a notebook and a pen, if that feels good to you. And if you want, you can also just start to respond in the chat. That's totally fine. I'd love to hear about your fear of the future and how that expression was for you. And if you have a question, you can pop that into the Q&A. The 57, it's a beautiful gate. It's in the knowing circuit. And it's known as the most intuitive gate in the chart. So we have this huge opportunity right now during the course of this conference to be able to really open up our intuition and be releasing our instinctual fear about what might happen, and then using our imagination, which is what Saturn wants us to be practicing, is imagining a new future. And then to be able to be working with that energy of revolution that Jupiter is bringing in. It's a very powerful transit that we have right now. Yes, so Virginia says, I dreamt about my container last night, but didn't realize it until just now starting this journey. That's great. Awesome. Okay, Carol says, more hopeful. Karen says, need me in presence and in body to have my own back. Yes, so to speak, without abandoning myself in times of deepest fear. Yes, thank you. Exactly. We do have habits of abandoning ourselves. I think we often learned it, early in life, or brought it in from other lives, or got it from other people, around us. And so being able to really, really be present and caring and loving for ourselves. And this is definitely an aspect of feminine sovereignty, because we have to have that kind of self-nourishment and the ability to not have to go outside of ourselves for support. Now, of course, we're designed to be in the world with other people. So of course we want to interact with and receive support from other people, but we also don't want to just have to do that in order to feel okay. So I appreciate that comment, Karen. Okay, Eva says she enjoyed the meditation. Thank you. And it says, woke up at 2 a.m. with thoughts that had the paralyzed about the future. This exercise was very helpful in helping me connect with my body and where I feel this, as well as offering a strategy for letting it go. Instinctual fear. Yes, exactly. Well, Mercury moved into the 57 today, so you may have been feeling that happening. Courtney says, I like the visual of placing that into a beautiful container rather than feeling like it needs to be hidden or ugly or thrown out. Exactly. Thank you, Courtney. I mean, some of these fears are what we pick up from the cosmos. Some of them are carried through our ancestral line, which in human design would be in our the red numbers in our chart. And some of them are, picked up from the collective unconscious. So it's like we want to be able to not make them bad and wrong, because, it's not like the future is assured and we know exactly what's going to happen. So having some fear about that makes sense. And at the same time, we want to be able to not be controlled by it, and to have ways to let it go and come back into present time. Okay, Lenora said, this is so amazing. Great. And Valencia say, I have that gate of revolution. Yes, all for transformation. Exactly. And Mindy says, I appreciate being able to identify and separate my fear and to be present. Yes, thank you. Exactly. And Virginia said, I felt the fear in my jaw and throat because I think because I stifle my own voice. Yes. Thank you, Virginia. So one of the suggestions I would have for all of you as we go forward over these next few days is to be paying attention to, if you start to feel fear in your body, and especially be like, oh, is that fear of the future? Is it fear of something else? And to just be able to place your hands on your body wherever you're feeling that. And you can do the same exercise where you're just going to be being present to it, surrounding it with loving kindness, seeing if there's something that wants your attention, if there's something that wants to be heard or seen. Some of our deepest wounding just comes from not feeling seen and heard in our lives enough. And if you have a tendency to stifle your voice, then you probably don't feel heard enough, right? And so just being able to pay attention and notice, and then bringing care there can shift everything for you, especially when you get into that practice. The other one is if you can just be like, switch. I'm going to switch the channel. I'm going to move off the disaster station onto the station of possibility, right? The station of potential and the statement of possibility. And that's what our intuition allows us to tap into as new possibilities that arise when we let ourselves out of that kind of cycling thought form that often has a lot of emotional charge to it, that is getting in our way of actually being able to create a future that we long for. And a core purpose of this conference is our ability to come together to be able to be imagining and creating what Charles Eisenstein calls the most beautiful world our hearts know is possible. I love that. It's the title of a book. It's a great book. I encourage you to go get it. So just being able to be in our practice while we're going through this time together. And we're not kind of going on autopilot and just listening to what our brilliant presenters have to say, but also to be doing our inner work while this is happening. And then also to be able to go over to Slack and communicate with each other. Also here, putting your comments into the chat so that we can all be hearing and witnessing each other. that this is part of how we're going to grow together. Okay. Yeah. So let's see. Did I read that one already? Yeah. Okay. It's important to separate fear. Many narratives are not our own. Exactly. Many narratives are not our own. And many of the ones that are our own are outdated. Like they're old, like they're from when we were kids, right? Or they're from another life, or they come from our ancestral line, because we have a lot of different influences happening with us. We have our own life story. We have the journey of our soul and all the different incarnations we've been through. And then we have our ancestral line, which is in the physical makeup of our physical body, right? So, so Tanya says, may I share my actual fear of the future? Yes, you may. Absolutely. We have a couple more minutes. And Barbara says, I'm almost 82 and my fear of death lurks behind my mind. Yeah. Yikes. I hear you, Barbara. I hear you. Yeah. And fortunately, there's a lot of really great work out now about death and dying. And I encourage you to go and check some of it out, because that might support you with that particular piece. Francis Weller is a name that comes to mind. He's a teacher on death and dying, but there's a number of really great teachers out there about that. Then Tanya says, I very much feel that mine come from my maternal ancestral line. Yes, we do. We can carry these things with us. And so if we're a person of color, particularly if we're African American or of Latino descent, or indigenous descent, in the United States, I mean, there's a lot of ancestral trauma, right? For those of us who are women who have been in abusive situations, we carry that kind of trauma also. So yes, we do. We have a lot in our ancestral line. And I have been told more than once by my, what I call my upstairs team, that this is the lifetime in which we can actually heal all the lifetimes. And I think it's one of the reasons that things are so intense for us, is that we are healing all the lifetimes. So, and that's why for those of us who have more resources, I think, given the opportunity and the responsibility, if we choose to take it, to actually to heal our ancestral lines. I know I've done a bunch of work healing my ancestral line, and also so we can be healing for people in the world who don't have the resources that they need to be able to do this kind of work, right? And I've been a pretty well-resourced person in my life. I'm a pretty prosperous person. And so I feel that I've been given extra shares, as my friend Ashana used to say. So, extra shares to heal. So if you feel that way, that maybe that's true for you, you're doing a lot of wonderful work for humanity. Oh, Caledonia, I hope I'm saying your name right. She says, yes, I have my ancestors all the way back to 1912. My grandparents hold their stories. Yeah. Karen says, I feel the lineage stuff. Tanya, sounds like all my decisions are twisted and I say yes when it would have been best to say no, and vice versa. I see my birth mom do that all the time. Yes. Yeah. So that's a really great awareness and something for you to give some loving attention to. Caledonia says, I feel I'm a bridge. And Tanya says, I've spent many years to heal my ancestral line. Lisa says, I have goosebumps. This is the lifetimes we heal other lifetimes. Yes. Sometimes it can be hard when we feel we're bearing this alone. Thank you for raising this issue. Exactly. And that's why we're coming together. Okay. And one more, it was interesting to read the book, My Grandmother's Hands. Isn't that an awesome book? I highly recommend it for all of you. It's about somatic trauma and racism. And there's sections for white people, sections for Black people, sections for police and for community, and understand more about the pain and trauma within the ancestral line of the white body, and how each of those affect the responses toward each other. Yes, absolutely. It's a highly, highly recommended book. Can I use this exercise with, you can use this exercise with anything. You can do this exercise with anything. Just create an energetic container, put it in there, surround it with light, give it some loving kindness, right? And part of it is that if it needs more attention, you can go back to it later and give it attention. And sometimes it will just dissolve given its own time.